Yeah, pretty much. Monday was the deadline for reporting 13F, so accordingly all the interesting people that I like to follow reported their holdings for the end of the last quarter on Monday. Top of my list, as always, is kind of Berkshire Hathaway. There's some stuff coming in, some stuff going out. Most of it's fairly inconsequential, but the stuff that was bought was Occidental, Paramount Global, Restoration Hardware, Celanese, Chevron, Taiwan Semiconductor, Louisiana Pacific and Jefferies. The stuff that went out was Kroger, General Motors, Activision Blizzard, BNY Mellon, US Bancorp and Store Capital in its entirety, that last one. There are two things that kind of stuck out, I guess. One that stuck out to everybody else and one that stuck out to me. The one that stuck out to everybody else was this $4 billion investment in Taiwan Semiconductor, because semiconductors are a kind of interesting space at the moment. It's quite a sizable investment in anything $4 billion to kind of get going with, and it's a new one in the Buffett portfolio. My initial reaction was that this is highly off-brand because it's not a US company, and Buffett is always insistent on betting on America and so on. But once you get past that, as Steve was saying, it starts to look a bit more like a straightforward kind of Berkshire buy. Steve?
It's a Buffett stock. It's just not an American company. I would assume, because I think Buffett knows a lot about Apple. I know he shied away from tech stocks for a really, really long period of time, but I would imagine as he's learned more and more about Apple, as he's really, really dug deep in them, he's probably learned how important Taiwan Semiconductor is to Apple, which has maybe piqued his interest in the stock. I mean, he's moved it in. It must be nearly 10. Is it 10th place, Steve? Now that's quite a big holding just to jump in and stick it straight in there. So, I mean, I think we would all here buy Taiwan Semiconductor if it wasn't in Taiwan. I don't think any of us at the price it is today would have an issue with sticking it in our portfolio and holding it long term. It's just that threat of China is just almost always knocking on the door. Paul?
Certainly. Sorry to plug ASML again, but how long until he dives that little bit further and realise how important ASML is to Taiwan Semiconductor? That was my first thought on this one. With TSMC, I don't think we can hold it in the ISA, can we? So that's a big problem for us if we really wanted it. And but I didn't realise he got rid of Activision. Has he fully got rid of Activision now? No, sorry.
Part of Activision's got sold down, sorry.
Oh, right, okay. So that might give you an indication of what the strength of that deal might be, unless he's something's going on there. Interesting. What do you think of the whole portfolio? Is it just the TMC thing that's really stood out there?
On the Activision thing for a moment, I mean, it's still a bigger holding than TSMC, which kind of indicates to me that it's probably not his bit of the thing that got sold. So it's either Todd or Ted who needs money to buy stuff and has seen something falling somewhere on that list of things that I mentioned and decided to shunt out some Activision to make way for it. Taiwan Semi is kind of...
a lot of sales at a loss, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a lot of sales at a loss, yeah.
That portfolio is down quite a bit. I mean, the company reported a net loss in their last quarter, mostly because they have to report unrealised gains and losses in the stock portfolio, and with stocks down, that weighed on higher operating earnings. So it's probably not something to worry about if you don't plan on selling the stocks, which I don't think they do in general. But a couple of thoughts then quickly from me. Taiwan Semi is a manufacturer, I guess, and Buffett does like a manufacturing company, I guess, especially one with a big old moat like they have, and their position kind of relative to Intel, which is attempting to develop itself quite quickly, is a fairly strong one, I think. I mean, Intel's spending an awful lot to catch up. I'll point out very quickly one of the other things I saw in a 13F that we won't go into is Seth Klarman has dumped all of his Intel stock. That was his biggest holding at the start of 2021, and he's now got rid of it entirely, and he is like value investing chief nerd from what I see of him. He is highly academic, highly intellectually minded, highly big on the distinction between investing and speculation, all that kind of thing. His book is a complicated, dense kind of thing that reads like an academic tome, which is what it is. Costs about £1 million, so more or less the same value as all of Intel. But he's got rid of all his Intel stock from what I can see of it, and that struck me as interesting at a time that Buffett and Berkshire are getting into Taiwan Semi, but Taiwan Semi wasn't really what caught my eye here. The one that caught my eye was Chevron. So the way I increasingly think about the Berkshire portfolio is there's an awful lot going on that doesn't really matter very much, because it's such a massively top-heavy portfolio one way, and it's about 75% in sort of maybe 8 or so, or 5 or so stocks, I think. So anything going on in that top 5 stocks is interesting and significant, and anything going on outside it is probably fairly small potatoes. There's another about 40 or so stocks that make up the remaining 25%, so nothing huge going on there. Chevron's now made its way up to third in this kind of thing, and that puts it like bigger than stuff like Coke and American Express and Kraft Heinz and all those things I associate as being kind of quintessentially Buffett things. And that means that there's an awful lot in Chevron for Berkshire here. It's now got a 3% dividend yield, a PE of around 10 or so. Its break-even price for oil is about $50 a barrel. Price is currently around 85 for what it's worth. It kind of got me wondering whether I should think about this as a stock. I then concluded I shouldn't, but that's getting to be a significant thing for someone who's a Berkshire Hathaway shareholder. Our top-heavy portfolio has got Chevron quite near the top of it now.
Interesting as well, though, Steve, is that he's now up to over 20% ownership of Oxy, and he's now just under 10% ownership of Chevron as well, which makes you think, I wonder if he is planning a takeover of Oxy at some point, getting towards 20% and constantly building that position. I mean, he has bigger positions in stuff like that. Let's not say that this is an automatic indicator. He's got bigger positions in things like Kraft Heinz, is nearly at 30%. But this Oxy stake just keeps going up and up and up, and it's, you know, it's a $60 billion company, but he's got that kind of cash hanging around for the right kind of company. And, you know, Oxy being bolted onto Berkshire Hathaway Energy would not be a bad thing for him to sort of stick under that sort of umbrella. I wonder if we could see him push this one even further.
People keep telling me that's not going to happen, and I don't really know why, because their case never really convinces me very much. They have the cash to do it. With the stake they currently have, Occidental, their share of Occidental's earnings go through the income statement rather than just the dividends that they get from them. And Occidental has a massive carbon capture project going on, which is its kind of interesting angle, plus a strong presence in the Permian Basin. And if you're worried about oil security going forward, that's probably quite an important thing. So does Chevron, for what it's worth, as well. So, I mean, both of those are, in net terms, a big bet on the Permian Basin and the oil coming out of the Permian Basin and the price of that oil coming out of the Permian Basin. I mean, I don't know what I think the price of oil is going to do for what it's worth. I think the Russia-Ukraine situation resolves itself one way or another and the price settles down a bit. When that happens, I don't know. Where it settles to, I don't know. And where it will go in between, I don't know. Which means that my kind of instinct here is to, if I wanted to try and own Chevron or Oxy, I would just buy Berkshire and let Buffett do it for me, I think, because I suspect he knows more about oil than I do.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd one. I think he's still waiting. For that. The interest rates are like gravity to stocks thing. I don't think he's gone further. I don't think he's buying 100% of any company right now. I think he's still waiting for the elephant gun to get released. I think he's waiting for P's and the S&P 500 to hit 14, 12. I think this guy has a lot of patience to take all the crap that he took through 2020 and 2022 to sit on, what is it, 150 odd billion in cash now. What's a few more months? What are you going to miss? I think he's still going to wait for that recession ticker to lock in and get some bigger deals. It might be Oxy, it might be the rest of Oxy, you know, but he's certainly catching energy companies at quite high prices at this point, don't you think?
He's catching oil companies with the oil price quite high. I guess he's betting it's going to stay there for a bit. And that's roughly how that works out. I mean, Chevron does have kind of renewable stuff and things that are not the Permian Basin, and that's where growth is meant to come from and so on. It's way beyond my capacity to try and work out here, but in net terms, it comes down to where oil is. Their break-even price is 50. Will it stay above that? Yes. Will it stay enough above that to justify its current price, which, as you say, Paul, is fairly punchy here. I mean, it's trading on a low PE, but that's because oil prices have been through the roof lately. They've been north of 100 or so. So you're factoring in high earnings. It's 10 times high earnings, basically, is what you're getting at there. Dividend yield is now 3%. It's not so long ago that we were in the pandemic and it was closer to 9%, from what I remember of it. And I remember thinking at the time people owning oil stocks should have kept them. and I would have come off well if I'd been following my own advice there.
You've got
classic strategy, though, right? A classic strategy of going against the grain here, and what Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger are known for. And this one's paid off.
You've got to remember the America's just released 715 million barrels of oil into the economy to try and bring their own inflation and petrol prices down. So at some point, you would assume that America wants to refill those reserves. So there's going to be a net buyer in the market for at least 715 million barrels over the next period of time. So that should add a nice buyer into the market to hold up oil prices, at least for the sort of medium term. So I don't think it's a bad move at all. Yeah, it depends where this oil price goes. Remember, they can add as much buying pressure as they want. If OPEC chooses to get the dollar barrel price down, they can do it, because Aramco can make profit on a barrel of oil at about $20. So they're in. There's no. They don't need it to be high.